Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thanks so much for joining us. Great episode today. It is with Patrick Cotnoir. But first, a little business. We posted the July Fest submission blog on the website, so go to thereitispod.com. And if you want to know what fests you can submit to in the month of July. And lastly, can you help us out with something? Every year there's like a podcast People's Choice Awards, and it's called Podcast Awards, and you can go to podcastawards.com and nominate us. Brother of the show did, which I very much appreciated. He submitted us in a few categories, and I humbly ask if you could do the same. Basically, you go to podcastawards.com, and there's a little blue button that says nominations voting now open, and it will be open until July 31st. And you click there to vote, and you put in some info, your name and whatnot, and your biggest podcast influencer. If you could say Jason Farr, that would be nice, but you don't have to. I put Mark Maron because he is my biggest when it comes to interviews. I love him. But Scott Ackerman and Conan O'Brien also up there, but I put in Mark Maron. And then after you put it in biggest podcast influencer, you'll say, I am a listener. And you can submit us to these 5 categories that Brother of the Show submitted us to. The Adam Curry People's Choice Award, Best Male Hosted Podcast, Best Black Hosted Podcast, Comedy category, and Rob has a podcast entertainment category. No, not Best Friend of the Show, Rob. A different Rob that I don't know. And put in There It Is. It might be a drop down, actually. So There It Is will come up. Please, if you can, nominate us for that. The link will be in the bio for it. And we're also going to put a blog up on thereitispod.com detailing how to do it with a pick. So if the way I explained this didn't help, well, there's going to be a blog explaining it a little better. All right, well, let's get to today's episode. It is with a talent booker and talent producer, and just a producer all around. He's worked on Chris Gethard Show, Sesame Street, SNL, UCB, tons of stuff, tons of stories. He gets into all of them. It's a really great chat and fun one. Here's my chat with Patrick Cotnoir. You have been living in New York for over a decade now.
Yeah.
When you started going to college here, how quickly were you starting to get involved at UCB or the comedy world and everything here?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of knew it existed when I moved here. I didn't know really what it was, but I had a general idea. And there was a girl I went to high school with. Shout out to Brianna Sampson. That's who I'm shouting out right now. Yeah. I think it was... I want to say it was my second week going to school here. She goes, oh, we should go to this comedy theater I go to, because she was going to Wagner out in Staten Island. And it was like instantly one of those things where I was like, oh, I guess this is just like what I do now. It was like, oh, I guess this is where I hang out. This is, where I spend my weekends. And then, I mean, basically it seems like every weekend from then on, pretty much, I was there going to one show or the other. Usually it was Asssscat, but I think the first show I saw was this show called Reuben Williams, which was Anthony King and a bunch of other people. And I was just, I was hooked. And it wasn't something I had performed in high school. I was in like the drama club and stuff, but I'd gotten that out of my system, I felt like. I didn't really want to do that anymore. So it was definitely a weird thing where I wanted to be involved, but not necessarily performing up there.
Okay.
I feel like that's a rare thing at that theater.
I do, and I feel like that's almost rare anywhere. Almost.
Yeah.
To have the interest to be involved, but specifically not as a performer is a first for me.
Yeah, I know, and I think that was weird for a lot of people there. I didn't really get involved at that theater specifically. I was not doing stuff there. I mean, really in any form until I started doing Asssscat, which was 2014. But I started working on the Chris Gethard Show in 2011. So it was about a year into it, and that was pretty much exclusively with UCB performers and stuff like that. So I was still in that, circle of people and in that atmosphere by working on that show.
Yeah, you mentioned Chris Gethard, and you've already mentioned UCB as well. You've had an illustrious career. You've done such awesome work, and and really from so many different ends, because you have the pedigree of things like Saturday Night Live and Chris Gethard and UCB. So from in the comedy world, super legit. And then also outside of the comedy world, you've worked at CNBC and Sesame Street. It sounds like the first place you were working at was the Chris Gethard Show, though?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess so. It was probably the first place. I was interning a bunch of places in college, so that's where the SNLs and the Sesames and all that come in. I was, trying to do as many internships as I could because school was not super entertaining to me. I was more using it as an excuse to just be in the city, to like be around the people who were doing the things that I wanted to do. But I think Gethard probably came first, and then the other internships sort of followed suit after that. So I would say Gethard was probably first.
Yeah, and how did you get involved? Was that an internship or? Yeah,
I mean, I knew who he was because I had seen him doing Asssscat, and then I was home for the summer. I had, moved out of my dorm and stuff after freshman year, and I saw that he had started doing his show on public access, and I moved back to the city maybe like 4 or 5 weeks after that, and brought some friends from college to go see it. And again, it was one of those things where I went to one and I was like, oh, I guess I just come here every week. Like, I guess this is just what I do. And it was so small at that point. There were so few people who were actually involved in the show and watching the show and like in the audience of the show, where in my crazy little 19-year-old head, I was like, oh, I should just work on this. I should just ask them if I can work on this, which is not really how most places work. Like, you don't just go up to someone and say, can I work on this? And they say, yeah, show up next week.
Right. I wish it worked that way.
I know, it would make life so much easier. And it works. It works sometimes like that. Like if you get really lucky and you meet the right person, or the right group of people, it can work out that way. But this one was very strange because at that point, and I think I don't think this is speaking out of school or that Gethard or anybody would get mad at it. No one really gave a shit about the show at that point because it was a few weeks into it. So it was still like finding its audience.
Right.
People were still discovering that it existed. So I was just doing whatever they needed me to do. It was like picking up chairs, setting up the stage before the show, like truly just the gruntiest of grunt works, like whatever they wanted. And eventually, I, ran the email and I was answering phones live on the air, to get people to call in and stuff like that. And then for the last probably 100 episodes or something, maybe, I was one of the 2 camera operators for the show. So it was truly just like, it was all hands on deck, everybody doing whatever.
It sounds, from everything I've heard about just the vibe I get from that show is very much like everyone's just doing whatever needs to get done.
Yes. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't,
Right.
And I think you got that vibe on the show where the show would start and he would just be like, nothing is ready. Why is nothing working? And it was like, because we're all 19 or 20 years old and trying to figure out how to run a TV station with no help. That was basically how it, it was the real life Muppet Show with everyone just insane, trying to make stuff hold together with duct tape,
It's rough out there. It's a very strange audience. I'm sorry about that.
That's hilarious that you refer to as the Muppet Show, but real life. Also, going back to Sesame Street, then was that an internship, and what exactly were you doing there?
Yeah, that was an internship. I've always been a big Muppet and Sesame fan. I used to want to, be a puppeteer when I was a kid. It was like one of those dream things when you're a kid. You're like, that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do. And I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like it sort of ties into meeting the right people, like what I said. When I was 12, this guy, Carol Spinney, who was the guy who played Big Bird and Oscar for 50 years, he wrote a book and he was doing a Q&A at UConn because they have a puppetry school there. my parents were like, "Oh, we should go. We should go see this guy."
Yeah, because you're
And
from Connecticut. And so
I'm from Connecticut.
right.
Yeah. So this was like less than an hour away. It was like very convenient. So I was, little kid, 10, 12 years old, something like that. And I was like, do you guys ever give tours of the set? That was my question during the Q&A. And he said, no, not really, but you got to know somebody. And he like gave a little wink,
Yes.
Do they give tours of the studio?
No, they don't really. You have to know somebody.
And I guess somehow he and my dad connected before we left. Like we went through and met him and everything. And he and my dad connected and like passed along each other's info. And I got a postcard like inviting me to come see the Sesame Street set when I was a kid. It was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I like met a bunch of people. Yeah, it all worked out really great. Met a bunch of people, went back a few more times, throughout like middle and high school and stuff. And it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I still want to work here. This is what I want to do, And when I was moving to the city, I reached out to one of the people I had met, one of the other puppeteers, and I was like, who do I talk to? What can I do to, do an internship here? And he put me in touch with the right person, and I ended up working there for a year, and it was at work, interning there. It was still work for a year, and it was great. Like you got to, we were on set a little bit, we were in the offices a little bit, but it was putting together the DVD releases that they would put out and like finding clips to use and making like a character Bible for people to use in case they don't know who, Forgetful Jones is, some character that hasn't been used in 30 years. You put this in here. But then we were also, on set and they were shooting. I was there the last time that Frank Oz has performed on Sesame Street.
Wow.
Very weird. I mean, I will be quiet like this. And then you talk like that, you go crazy.
I have a problem with my hat's pinned on my head.
The last time Jerry Nelson, who was the guy who did The Count before he passed away, I was there for it.
Greetings, I am the Count. Do you know why they call me the Count? Because I love to count things.
I know.
It was like a lot of like very important seminal things that you don't realize at the time. And now you're looking back and you're like, oh, wow, it was actually, there was a lot going on.
So that last time Frank Oz was there, just because you were a college kid, it wasn't resonating with you the same way that it would now.
Yeah, no, but I didn't know it would be the last time that he would do stuff because he hasn't done anything there since 2012, I guess, or whatever.
Oh, so it wasn't like a big send-off.
No, it was just, he hasn't come in and done anything. It was just like, he may again at some point, but up until now, it is currently the last time he has done something. So that's it's wild. It's like a crazy thing to have, and when he was there, I don't even know if I was working those days, but I was like, I'm coming in, I'm coming in, whether I'm working or not. I just want to come watch and come hang out and see this happening. But yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was definitely an internship. So, there's a lot of like coffee and copies and stuff like that. But it's something that no matter what job interview I'm doing, when I'm looking for a gig, it always gets brought up. Like there's a few things that always get brought up, and it's like that, SNL, and usually Gethard if the person is cool. Those are like the big three things.
Yeah, it's just kind of like washing over me the magic of Sesame Street right now.
Yeah, and, I know.
And just getting to be there and just getting to come in and see stuff. I mean, that's really a special.
It was really cool. It was a really fun thing.
Yeah. When you were bouncing around to different places, what was the sort of idea? I mean, because there's, aside from what I've already mentioned, there was also above average.
Yeah.
So when you're going to all of these different places, is it all internships pretty much, or was some of it like an actual job? And regardless of whether it was a job or not, since they were of different worlds, some comedy, some news, what was the idea that what was the track you were trying to get on at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. That was the whole thing, was I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, I still don't know what I want to do, even though I'm like so far into it. It's like, yeah, I like the thing I'm doing now and I really enjoy it, but it might lead to something else. And that was even like, it was sort of whoever I thought was cool and could get me, doing something that I liked doing. But, CNBC was an outlier because that was news, and that was not really what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something production related, comedy related, something in that world. But CNBC, the great thing about CNBC, and it was really fun there, and I like a lot of people there, but it was not what I was into. Like, I just didn't, it didn't resonate with me. But it helped. It was one of the things that got my foot in the door for the SNL interview because it's both NBC.
Right.
So it's one of those things where even though it was not ideal on the job track, it still did get me to something that was more ideal. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the internships I did in school were SNL, CNBC, Above Average, Sesame, and UCB Theater. I did an internship there too.
Okay. And I don't know how much you can...
all while in school and doing Gethard. So it was a busy couple of years.
Yeah, because SNL, that's not an internship for the summer.
No. Yeah, no. I was there.
They don't shoot during the summer. Yeah.
I know. I was there. I was there for a season and a half. I was there from like December 2012 to May 2014. Like it was like 3 semesters I did, and I was in the post department. So I was not like in the writers world. But it was kind of better because I think the writers, interns as a whole, mostly, they sort of get cycled through a lot where it's just like, you're the intern, like you're the stereotypical intern. You're making us copies. Hey, I need a lunch. Go buy me lunch. Like that kind of thing. Whereas I was in post and we sort of just got to like hang around and like we would like record the rehearsals and put them up on a server for people to watch it and like hang out in the control room.
Creative development.
Yeah, totally. Which was cool. It was very cool to like, you're not doing the grunt work. You're like, they had this whole system that we would do where we would sit in the control room, record all the rehearsals, upload them to a server. So like the cast and the writers could go watch them back to like see how they were going and see what they could cut. And, it was a very interesting way to just see how it works on a macro level.
Right.
How that show is actually put together.
It's unreal that show was put together in a week. I mean, such a huge crew, and I know it's. I'm sure somebody would say, well, they can do it all in a week because they have such a large crew. But the larger the crew, the more you have to get people in line. That has to be. Totally. I mean, talk about a well-oiled machine. That's got to be like a clock. That's got to be like a watch.
And I mean, it's also like less than a week because the read-through's on Wednesday. So they really don't even know what they're doing until Wednesday. It's insane. The show should be overhauled and they should figure out a better way to make it work. Just because like it works in the 70s when you're all on cocaine. And I know this is not a hot take. I know a lot of people say this, but like there's so many easier ways you can make that show work. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, this is the tradition. This is the way we do it. This is how it works.
That's why so many people who they asked to host have said no. Because it's like anxiety inducing.
Absolutely.
And people who've done it have not gone back because of that reason. They were like, hey, I did the thing, but it's something I don't know how people do.
Yeah. And you get burned out. It takes a really specific type of person. Like, I know a lot of people who are still there and like, you see who makes it and you see who doesn't last because, it's a crazy schedule. Right. You don't have a life. Like your friends are the people you work with because those are the people you're with, from 9 a.m. to 4 a.m., like 4 nights a week. Like it's insane all the time. But it was a really positive experience. I was there for a lot of cool stuff and got to, hang around. And during the show, we didn't have anything to do. So a lot of times I would just go down to like the backstage area where they're doing like makeup and stuff and just like lean up against a wall and watch the show from back there. And it was like, crazy watching, what happened while like the Stefan goodbye with Seth Meyers, like when Seth was leaving.
Couple friends want to stop by and say something.
We're like a gateway drug, like bath salts and meow meow.
You have been the heart of this show for over a decade.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're like the Sting of SNL.
Why am I like the Sting of SNL?
Because it takes you 12 years to finish.
Okay. Anybody, thank you for coming to my last show.
It's your last show?
Oh, God. I had the best time, and I met the best people, and I just want to thank the crew and the cast, and especially the writers and Lauren.
And then like watching them do that and then turning and seeing them walk out of the studio on screen and then through a door next to me. And it's just like, this is, if the camera was like 6 inches to the left, like, oh, I'm in the shot, you need to watch out. But it was so wild, you know, it's just, it's weird being on these things that you've seen for years, like, you know, Sesame and SNL, where it's like those things are such huge parts of so many people's lives, and then getting to work on it at such a young age was wild.
That must have been that moment that you described of watching them perform, and you're watching on the screen, then they walk through a door that's right next to you. So that had to have been super surreal to see.
It breaks your brain.
Yeah, because like, okay, television, the way I always see them.
Yes.
And then they walk off camera, and usually I just don't know what happens. And now, they're right next to me.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, where's the after party again? And you're like, wait a second, no, you're on TV. You're a TV man. Why are you talking about real life stuff, you know?
That's got to be bizarre. And part of, for the people who do have to work with the stars directly. That's got to be a part of what they want the employee to be able to handle, because of course you can't every week just be freaking out because Robert De Niro's there or whoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is definitely something where like I sort of got normalized to it, even though I was not directly involved with a lot of like the big stuff on that show. Just being around it for a year and a half, like it sort of just becomes second nature. And I'm still like remembering stories or things that happen from there where like I go to tell someone it and they're like, that's insane that you were, you know, around for that thing. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I guess it is. I was there. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. It was work for you at some point.
It was. Yeah.
I've often thought that Lorne Michaels has the best job in the world, but also the worst job in the world, because I love SNL. I like watching it on Saturday nights live. I don't like watching it Sunday morning. Even.
Same.
But it's his job, so he's also got all the stress of putting that show on. So when he's sitting and watching, like his seat, just watching the show, I would love to have, but I wouldn't want the position, I don't think.
I know. It's an impossible job. I mean, it's one of those things where it makes nobody happy. You know what I mean? Like, or not nobody. It will never make everybody happy. And I think that's a very hard thing to reckon with. But I imagine after 50 years, you're just like, this is the show I want to put on, or this is the show that the people who work here want to put on. So I guess this is what we're doing. You know, sorry, it doesn't make you happy.
That's one of the things I think a lot of times there's always a reckoning that's going on. And a lot of people talk about the reckoning that happens online with questioning systemic problems or work issues and things like that. But that's a conversation that's been going on for decades. It's not a new conversation.
Oh,
but,
of course.
You know, it is a sort of thing where people, this is a constant conversation, I imagine, in the SNL world, because every few years, someone's like, why do they do it that way if it's so stressful? But, you know, there are people who want to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it.
Yes. It's one of those things where that's what you signed up for. You know? Like you know what this is going into it. And it's hard to it's a live show that's very stressful all week. It's hard to complain about when it's like, well, I mean, this is what it's always been. It's not like this was sprung on you, you know?
Right.
And it's not for everybody. I don't know. I've been very lucky over the years to work at the places I have, but it's definitely, it shows you how stressful the industry and the world is, and that world, not the world in general too, but you know what I mean?
Of course.
But you know, there's nothing like live TV. It's the best.
It's so
the best. So yeah.
And so you were there for a year and a half. And I don't know what stories stories that maybe you don't think are wild, but other people think are, that you could tell. Do you have any other?
Oh, geez. I mean, you know, it was just like, it was a weird time because I was there for like, I don't know about stories so much as just moments that experience, where it was like Bill Hader and Fred Armisen and Seth Meyers' last episodes.
What is a human magic 8-ball?
It's that thing of when you ask a question, So you shake a midget until he says, ask again later.
Stefan, I'm sorry. This just isn't what we're looking for.
You know what? You never respect me, Seth. But I've met someone else. He likes me for me, and we are getting married. Bye, Seth Meyers.
Well,
Hey, go to him.
Follow your heart, bro! Follow it!
for Weekend Update, we are Seth and Stefan Meyers. Good night!
And then like seeing like John Goodman coming back to host after so long.
This is my 13th time hosting. I hosted SNL every year from 1989 to 2001. Then I stopped because I had to work. I was in Monsters University and Argo and 36 Coen Brothers movies.
And like Justin Timberlake, the craziest thing was Justin Timberlake doing the Five Timers Club sketch when he hosted for the 5th time, because like it was
So
just
jealous. So jealous you were there for that.
It was a deranged week where you just look around and it's like Tom Hanks, Baldwin, Steve Martin, Martin Short, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy, Paul Simon, and then you get so excited for all those, and then you look, and that was for me. I looked and I saw Candice Bergen, and that was my holy shit moment where I was like, holy shit, that's Candice Bergen. That's Candice Bergen. Like that was the craziest one.
5 timers, yeah.
Yes, but that was the craziest one for me where I was like, oh yeah, I mean that's it's Chevy Chase. Okay, great. But then I was like, oh my God, Candice Bergen.
I remember when I saw that episode, and my roommate, one of my good friends, he was like, I partly want to watch this to see you react to this.
I know.
Because when Candice Bergen came on and went, ooh, Candice Bergen.
I know.
Because
it had been so long since she was there. I don't think she had, I want to say it was like 91 was the last time she hosted. It was like it was like very early, late 80s, early 90s Murphy Brown era.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that was the wildest one just because everywhere you looked was someone obnoxiously famous and obnoxiously funny. And it was just like, yeah, it was wild. But that was the other fun thing about, like, you never knew, because we weren't in the writers area, we didn't necessarily know who was showing up until like maybe a day before or something like that.
Yeah.
So like you would just be walking, then it was like, oh, there's Aaron Paul dressed up as Jesse Pinkman. Or like, what is he doing here? Why is he here?
I had this friend, and he got sick. But because there wasn't Obamacare, he couldn't afford the treatments. So he did what any of us would have done. He started cooking meth.
Or like, just random people.
Random because
Rodman?
they were hosting, and then it's like, why are they doing a sketch about this? Okay,
I think Dennis Rodman was there.
Live in New York, it's Saturday night!
And like Liam Neeson did something.
Crimea had been taken. I hate it when things are taken. Mr. Putin, Vladimir, I've never met you. But what I do have is a very particular set of skills.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Just like very weird stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy. It's kind of a blur. Truly, I haven't thought about the fact that Dennis Rodman was there until right now. Like, it's been like 6 or 7 years, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about it, because it was like during the whole him being friends with Kim Jong-un thing, and he like did some cold open or something. But yeah, there's so many things that you forget about the insane things that happened.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, especially
when it's happening so often. I mean, that's what you always hear about New York City and Los Angeles, is that there are so many celebrities that the average person is just kind of like, yeah, whatever, that's George Clooney.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
But to the tourists, it's like, oh my God.
Of course. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of my thing now, is doing talent stuff. So it's sort of, it is sort of just getting like desensitized to it, where it's, every week or whatever, you're seeing someone who is one of your favorite people, or like someone that you really admire.
Right.
And you just have to, it's a normal thing. They're here to do a job. You're doing your job. You shake their hand, talk to them, and make them, comfortable. And that's kind of the whole, gig.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely could rock with just seeing someone famous that I've seen my whole life, because then it's like, there are a couple of people I might get starstruck from that I'm not someone that I'm a big fan of. Like Madonna, I pay a ton of attention to, but I imagine
totally.
if she walks in the room, I would be a little starstruck. But if it's like Conan O'Brien walked in,
totally.
How do I just act normal?
I mean, when I started booking Asssscat, it was Alan Alda and Mark Hamill. Those were the two where it was like, holy shit, like that's Alan Alda,
Yeah.
And just getting to see, and on Gethard, it was like that all the time, like Will Ferrell or whatever. Like, there's so many people where it's just, it's weird to see someone who you've always seen as a two-dimensional person on a TV to then all of a sudden be directly in front of you, looking you in the eyes, and you have to talk to them. Like, it's just such a weird experience. And you have to talk to them when they're like, hey, Patrick, where's the bathroom? Like that kind of thing,
Absolutely. Yeah, just normal everyday stuff. I saw, and I love that I saw it this way. I was in the office at Late Show once, and to meet with the producer. And we walk up the person who went to get me walked me up the stairs, and I just walked to the top of the stairs and looked up, and there was Stephen Colbert, one of my heroes, one of my absolute heroes. I'm South Carolina native, of course I love him. And he's walking by, and like we didn't make eye contact, but I just saw him, and he was just a dude walking in the office, scratching an itch. Like he literally like scratched an itch and was just looking at something. And I was just like, I'm glad that I saw this.
Of course. The humanizing moments are the best.
Yeah. That's the time you want to see these people, because you don't want to put people too much on a pedestal. You don't want to get into celebrityism, especially in your line of work.
Yeah.
Or the kind of work that I'd love to get. Because you got to be able to just talk to them. And if you're sitting there like shaking, like, what do you want for lunch? Then you're going to be like feeling weird and
of course
not want to be there.
It's one of those things where it's a learned skill. Like you just have to get used to it. When I was younger, I'm sure it was different. I'm sure it was not. I've always been pretty good at keeping my composure about that kind of stuff, but like, I'm sure it has gotten better. And the fun things are just like talking to them about banal, I don't want to hear about what it was like filming Anchorman. Just like, what's in your hotel room? Like, where are you staying? What's going on? Like that kind of stuff. It's so much more fun. And I find that more interesting.
Having a normal conversation and laughing about whatever you're talking about. Or
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Human moments, human interactions like that. That's really key. And I mean, I've heard a lot of celebrities talk about how they would prefer that to getting their picture taken.
Yeah.
Just because they actually are connecting with this person. They just think that's nicer, Not that they are against the pictures all the time, but
no, it's part of the gig.
Right. But, sometimes you have just a nice conversation with somebody that's meaningful to both of them.
Totally.
Let's talk about working at Asssscat. So you were there 6 years working as a talent booker for Asssscat 3000. For those who don't know, at UCB Theater, the flagship show is this improv show where someone comes in, tells a story, that they get a suggestion from the audience, and they just say, well, that makes me think of this story, and they start telling that story, and then the improvisers do scenes based off of that story, and they go back and forth with that for a little bit. So since UCB is such a big theater, you were getting a bunch of big names, like you mentioned, Mark Hamill coming in. Is the ask hard when it's a show like Asssscat, since UCB has such a reputation of being a big deal? Was it tough to get people like John Hamm or someone like that to come in?
No, it was, well, yes. I mean, if you looked at how many emails I sent over that time versus how many people actually did it, it would appear hard. But then you get this surprising people who say yes, and I'm fine sending 100 emails and having 3 people say yes. You know what I mean? Like that's just part of the gig at this point. But it's fun trying. My whole thing with that show, which is not going on anymore because UCB does not exist in New York anymore, but we are. I should put this in right now. This is the perfect time to talk about it. On August 1st, we're starting up at Caveat Theater through the Squirrel. We're doing a show. It's the same thing as Asssscat. It'll be the same cast, same show. We're calling it Rat Scraps, which we like. We think it's a fun title. So we're starting it back up again. So it'll be interesting to see the difference there. But
very cool.
With a show like that, it had such a pedigree because it had been going on for 22, 23 years, something like that, some insanely long amount of time. And so many people would perform in it. And so many people had told monologues at it that like using those names really helped. Being able to say like, Kevin Bacon's done this show. Are you better than Kevin Bacon? You know what I mean? Just like, it's hard for people to say no, where they're like, well, I like Meredith Vieira, and if she did it, I can do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I also, if you say yes to the show, you're the kind of person I want doing the show. If you're having reservations or like not wanting to do the show, I don't want you there. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to have fun.
Their arm. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to have fun. So why do I want you to do it? I want you to be there to have fun and to give into it and just like speak freely and be a real person. That's what you wanted. So it wasn't hard necessarily. I didn't book as many comedians as I think people expected there to be. Comedians meaning like stand-ups or whatever. I always tried to I wanted like the weirdo character actors or like the New York Times reporter or like the, a film editor or something like that. I wanted someone who you don't necessarily hear stuff from. And then every so often, Alan Alda comes through. You know what I mean? Like you get cool people, but I also wanted some name that you've seen a ton, but you've never heard from this person.
Right.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was always my go-to. And I think it was like 550 shows or something like that by the time I finished, because we would do 2 a week. For like 6 years or whatever, basically every week. So yeah, I always wanted different types of people that you wouldn't see at any other comedy show. Preferably people who weren't comedians, weren't necessarily funny. I just wanted a real story. I didn't want you up there telling your tight five for Letterman. Like, it's hard for them to make jokes off of jokes.
Yeah.
So I just want to hear about, here's a good one. Bradley Whitford did it. And he told a story about his dog eating sushi and how he had to like pry it out of its mouth or something like that. Like it was just like, sushi. No, not sushi, salmon. He ate salmon and he had to like pull it out of its mouth, and he like got down on the ground and was like fully acting it out. And I was like, this is perfect. It's not a funny story. It's just like, this is what you thought of. This is, you're fully committed to it. You're telling the story. It's like you're at a fun party and you're just talking to people.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted.
Yeah. Who were some of the people that are like a name that people has heard a lot, but it's not like a big name?
2 people that I loved having were Bobby and Christina Lopez, who wrote the music for like Frozen and like Coco, and he did Avenue Q, but he has a double EGOT. He has 2 EGOTs.
That's right.
Which is insane. Right. And he's like so young. But they're people where it's like you see their name on everything. And if you watch the award shows, you see them. But like you may not have ever heard them talk beyond like, I want to thank the Academy. Thank you so much to my reps.
They're not on the talk shows a bunch.
But then Christina comes in. Yeah, and then Christina comes in and talks about going Halloween, doing Halloween as a kid, like stuff like that, where it's just like interesting things, not talking about Olaf the Snowman, talking about other stuff in their lives.
Right.
They were great.
That sounds like the attitude I take with asking people to be on this podcast.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to pick this person's brain because they're interesting.
Totally. Yeah. It's more fascinating to me. And I think it's better from an audience standpoint, because the bigger you get, unless you're a certain type of person, I think the more guarded you are and the more like safe your stories are, the more like, I don't want this thing to get out there, even though it's a little embarrassing to me. I don't want to tell 200 people it. Whereas if you're like a guy who did 6 episodes on The Blacklist and just like is like a working character actor, you'll be like, Yeah, I got into a bad car wreck when I was a kid and it was my fault. Like just like talking about some story that does not make you look good, but you're still able to like give all the details and like tell this whole story without your publicist getting worried that
Right.
like
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah.
it's going to get leaked to some blind item thing or whatever.
Oh yeah. I mean, Jennifer Aniston, how's she gonna be able to talk her team into her telling an off-the-cuff story?
Exactly. And I think that scared some people because they're not. You see the word improv, and if you're like a guy, if you're an author or whatever who like does not do a lot of public speaking, you're like, I can't do improv. I'm not that guy. Like, you don't want me here, and I'm like, but I don't want you to do improv. I just want you to talk about you.
Right.
That's all I want. Like, just tell me some weird story. So I think it's daunting for a lot of people, and I totally understand when people say no, or if they're like, this just isn't my bag. Like, it's fine. I get it.
I mean, those were the same answers. Before I left South Carolina, I was on a team that did the Armando, did that form that Asssscat does. And we would, the cast members would book the people. And there were a couple of people who were known in town that I asked because I worked with them, and they were both really uneasy about the idea, and they never did it. And it was for that reason of like, well, I don't want to perform. It's like, you don't have to perform. It's like, well, I just don't know if it's all of that concern of how much can they expose publicly.
Totally. And there have been a bunch of people over the years where they were like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it just to like get myself out there and like try this because I'm never going to get asked to do this again. So like, might as well try it. And then after the first story, they'll come up to me and be like, I'm so happy I did that. Like why would I have not wanted to do that? And it's always very nice to hear that. The fact that they like, took that chance, took that risk, and then it paid off for them and for me, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. How much of that role and other roles similar to that, how much of that preparation is you walking them through it, and how much of that is calming them down?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it. On the day, it's a lot of it. And it was, it was like that for Asssscat. It was like that. It's like that for Lucas. It's like that for Gethard Show when it was live and stuff like that. Like there's everything is that. Explaining, a lot of my job is explaining to reps or to the people themselves what the show is, because those three shows are known in their circles. And if you are a fan of that show, you are very much a fan of that show. You are a hardcore fan of those shows, those three shows.
Yep.
But if you've never heard of them, it does not mean anything to you. So like, a big part of the show is definitely like, okay, here's what this is. Here's how this works. We walk you through it. We make it as easy as possible for you. You don't have to worry about anything. It's truly a well-oiled machine at this point. Like, we make it super easy. We've done this before. I promise you, we do this every week. We will not make you look bad. Like, that is kind of the thing that we have to talk them through, where it's like, I did not invite you here so you get embarrassed. Like, if you get embarrassed, I'm sad and it makes me look bad. Right. So I don't want that for you. So I'm also looking out for me. Yeah. I don't want you to talk to your friends who I'm asking to do the show and then you're like, oh no, I had a bad time. Like, that's the last thing I want, because then it makes my job so much harder.
I'm only asking because I know you can do it.
Yes, I know you can do it. And I know that if you actually try and actually like put in the small amount of work I'm asking, you will have a good time. If you come in hostile or like not happy to be there, you're not going to have a good time, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Right.
So like, just come in, relax, have fun, and you're going to be good. And it's so rare that on those shows, I think the person did not leave having a good time. I could probably count on under two hands out of the hundreds and hundreds of shows, like the time when someone left and I was like, okay, I guess I'm never talking to them again, because like I'm embarrassed that you did not have a good time,
Yeah. And sometimes that's just their anxiety about the situation, and it's not anything else, and that's tough. It's tough to have that, to work in this industry with that anxiety. But
I'm happy they tried it.
Right. Was the George Lucas talk show the first time you were working on something from its inception out of these things? Because I guess Asssscat was already around, and Chris
I
Gethard,
guess
you
so.
were, coming in.
Yeah, Lucas started in 2014, and on the first show, I was the warm-up comic. Inadvertently, I was not planned to be the warm-up comic, but I showed up, and Connor said to me, "Hey, so-and-so can't make it. I need you to warm up the crowd." And I was like, "No, that's not what I do. I don't want to do that at all." But he made me do it. And then I took a little bit of time off. I took probably like 4 months off just because he didn't ask me to work on it. So like, it was one of those things where I was just like not, gonna do anything. And that was fine. But then I started showing up, and this was back, it was at UCB theater. At that point, I guess it was in the East Village, in the UCB East space. Started showing up, started just helping him on the show. And then a couple months into it, he was talking with me and someone else, and he introduced me to them, and he goes, "Oh, this is Patrick. He's my producer." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" "No, I'm not." Like, he goes, "Yeah, you're my producer." And I'm like, "You need to tell me these things. Like, you can't just assume I'm your producer." "I want to be." "Yes, that sounds great." But I had no idea. So I was not Inception, but it's been going 2014. I think we're on our like 7th year at this point. And I was there for 6.5 of them, so it's been going a while. And it's gone through, I should explain what it is to people. It's a talk show where comedian Connor Ratliff plays George Lucas, and Griffin Newman from The Tick and from Blank Check podcast plays this character Watto, who's a CGI character in the Star Wars prequels. And they interview regular people, actors, comedians, whatever, as themselves. So it's truly like you're going on the Tonight Show, except Jimmy Fallon is 75-year-old retired billionaire filmmaker George Lucas.
And the sidekick is not Steve Higgins, but
yes, but an anti-Semitic slave trading alien.
Right.
Yeah. And it's gone through, a lot of changes. It was at UCB East, and then it went to Hell's Kitchen and sort of became like a little bit bigger of a show. And now, since the pandemic, up until a few months ago, we took a little time off right now. It's been a live streaming show. It was every week, and we would do fundraisers, and like so many people were on. We had Kevin Smith on, we had Leah Thompson, we had Whoopi Goldberg, just like insane people come on this show. It's very weird.
It's very strange. Kathleen Kennedy on the show?
We did not. I wish we had Kathleen Kennedy.
I saw that somewhere.
Man, I wish.
I thought I saw someone who actually worked on Star Wars was a guest.
Well, I mean, there have been Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar Binks, was on it. Like, there's like a lot of people who have done, worked for Lucasfilm or in the movie. Julian Glover, who is the bad guy in Last Crusade and was General Veers in Star Wars, like a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. So there have been people.
They're not people who are necessarily as directly involved with Lucas.
Yeah, maybe not directly involved or still working for the company. It gets a little dicey to have people on when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a super fun thing. During the pandemic, when it went digital, I also became like an on-camera part of it, an on-camera co-host, whatever part of it, which was definitely a big change for me because I was never a personality, as we discussed. It was always a behind-the-scenes thing. But I'm glad that I did it because I think it helped me not go insane this last year.
Yeah.
And getting to talk to, insane amount of cool, crazy people who thankfully agreed to come on and do the show has been a blessing, a true blessing.
At this stage, what is the role that you have? I mean, obviously, for some of the things we were talking about, it was sort of like the duties around the office that has to get done, and it's not a creative necessarily role. But now you're more involved with the creative end game. What does your job entail?
Yeah, I mean, for that one, it was booking the show each week, and the show would, at minimum, this might scare people away, but I don't want it to. At minimum, it was 4 hours each week, and we would have at minimum like 3 guests a week. But then there were some weeks where we would do fundraisers. So we would, for example, one week we watched all of Aaron Sorkin's TV show Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And had people who worked on the show come on, and I think we had 68 people from the show on the live stream throughout the day.
Wow.
So the majority of my job is just like coordinating that and like trying to get, A, book the people, B, coordinate times, C, like send them all the info they need, try to catch them up, because for a lot of those shows, they're coming in like 13 hours into a live stream. So we can't like talk to them off the air. It's literally just like being dry. It's that guy from Dr. Strangelove riding the bomb out of the plane directly into our show, and they're just dropped in and they got to figure it out on the fly. Like that's truly what it is, which is scary, but so many people did it. And it was like, it's just very funny hearing something that always brought me joy on that show was having some revered actor or director or something just say, yeah, Watto, that's true. That's a great point. Just like fully like committing and just acting as if the things that are happening in front of them are really what's happening. Or like Stephen Tobolowsky was on. Great character actor in hundreds of things.
We'd be remiss if we didn't discuss your role as Max Applewhite in a film that I conceived and produced in the early 90s, Radioland Murders, which is a different era, and certainly a different level of intensity in some ways, but I think they're kindred spirits in some ways. Anytime you take a peek behind the curtain, do you have any fond memories of playing the role of Max Applewhite?
So many, George, and I have many memories with you. Many intense memories with you. In fact, I thought it was going to be the end of my career. We shoot the last scene. It's time I'm already too late for early boarding. I have to get from Coralco Studios where we are. And is it okay for me to use improper language?
Anything. You can say anything.
Okay. So anyway, I shoot the scene. We finish. I'm running to go to the car that's going to take me to the airport. And then, George, you called me back and you said, Stephen, I'm sorry. I put my thumb on the lens. Can we reshoot your scene? And I said something to the effect of, here I am shooting with George fucking Lucas, biggest director in the world, greatest writer. I have a show to get to. George, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. George. I'm going to give you one take. If you get your measly hands off of the damn camera, let these people. And I am so angry.
And would just be like, well, George, you remember I came to your 50th birthday party up at Skywalker Ranch, and like telling a real story about going to George Lucas's birthday party and just like fully straight facing, be like, you and we talked to Harrison for a really long time. I'm sure you remember that. And just like people really coming on, wanting to play, fully getting invested in it, but also like having a good conversation and like talking about stuff that they never would have talked about. Like so many people from Studio 60 have not spoken about Studio 60 since 2007, when that show went off the air.
Absolutely, because I imagine it was kind of a heartbreaking thing for a lot of them. Because
of course.
It was being presented as the new prestige show from Aaron Sorkin, and it was it was the show that NBC was putting all their marketing money into, it seemed.
Yeah.
Came out the same year as 30 Rock. 30 Rock is a show everyone knows about.
Yeah.
Studio 60 lasted the one season.
Yeah.
And so that must have been gut-wrenching for a lot of them.
I'm sure. Yeah, because you think it's your big break. We had like, I think it probably is the largest oral history of that show that will ever happen, just because so many people were on to talk about it. And we didn't have Sorkin or Bradley Whitford or Matt Perry, but we had like Steven Weber and Nate Cordry and Tim Busfield and, Christine Lottie and like a ton of the writers and directors and costume designers and editors and just like so many people involved in it in different ways. So you truly got to hear every single for people who are watching who don't know how the sausage is made, the TV sausage is made, it was really a masterclass in people being like, well, I would get the script on Monday and then I would start making the costumes because we'd have to shoot on Wednesday. And just like getting to hear every single piece of it throughout the day from so many people. I think it's the thing I'm the most proud of from this last year, just because like I like that show a lot, even though I understand the flaws. But getting so many people to come together to talk about something on such a dumb show, such a dumb platform. And then we also raised like $30,000 for Broadway Cares that day. So like it was like it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So my job, to get back to your question, my job is like booking, wrangling, getting them on the show, making sure they show up on the show, and then just kind of sitting back and letting the boulder roll down the hill. Because at a certain point, there's not much you can do, and it's just like, this is going, and we can't change much, So have fun, hop on, and see if you can hang on with us.
And how different was that role, the role you had at the President Show? You were a talent coordinator, so was it basically the same thing where you're just wrangling everybody?
Yeah, it was mostly wrangling. I booked a couple people there. I was only there for like 8 months, maybe 6 to 8 months. I was there in between Gethard seasons, between season 2 and 3. So I just had, nothing to do for a while. And that show was starting up, and I'm buddies with Attamanik and Peter Gross and like all these people who were doing it because Attamanik's first time being Donald Trump, trying out the impression, was at Asssscat.
I turned the Oval Office into a classic late night set. I've got a desk.
So it was one of those things where it was like kind of a full circle thing where it's like, oh, great, now I get to work on this. So I booked a couple people for it, but then it was mostly just like wrangling, being around, doing paperwork, getting them ready in the green room, walking them out to the, prepping them for the interview, walking them out to the set, and then getting them in a car and sending them home, all that fun stuff.
Fun show.
Yeah.
Wild show.
Wild show.
Wild. I mean, are you in the MCU now, or is that when you work at Marvel, can you say that you are in the MCU?
I'm on the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki. I don't think I am technically in the MCU, but I'm sure, again, much like SNL, if you move the camera 6 inches, I'd probably be over there.
Oh wow.
I'm in the Thanos fight at the end of Endgame. I just never show up on camera. That's
off camera.
Yeah, I'm right off camera. It's like me and Howard the Duck. We're just like, we're fighting one guy the whole time, but we're mostly just chatting.
That's funny. But your role there is editorial and talent producer. So what does that entail? And I see that it's for Marvel, but how does it work with Marvel? Because there's obviously so many divisions.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of Marvel. I'm the booker for their it's mostly new media world in New York. So it's like their podcasts or video stuff that they put out on their social media. And in normal times, we would go to all the premieres and all the Comic-Cons and do live streams from the red carpet, or just like over the weekend at San Diego Comic-Con and just have a bunch of people come up and be interviewed. So it was, again, just like booking mass amounts of guests and then like getting them to come do
like
stuff.
Doing the press junket sort of?
Yeah, kind of press junket-y stuff.
Okay.
Or just like, this writer is at San Diego. Let's have them come up for a 7-minute interview in the Marvel booth. Or like, it could be a guy who's writing Thor, or it could be like James Marsters, who played played Spike on Buffy. Like just anyone I could grab who was tangentially related to Marvel or had an interest in Marvel, which was great because you got to have a lot of cool like voice actors and actors and comic book writers and artists and whoever I could grab was great. But then we'd go to the premieres and do the live stream interviews with the actors as they were like walking into the premiere, which was very cool. So getting to go to that Endgame premiere and watch it in the same room with like everybody who worked on the movie and every actor and stuff. And, it's a very surreal experience. It's a very strange thing, but very fun.
Yeah. I mean, the surreal stuff that you've been able to see and be around.
I know. It's a weird life.
How many times did you see that movie in the theater?
Endgame?
Yeah.
Saw it at the premiere. I saw a Marvel screening with everyone at work in New York. Maybe 4.
Okay. How many normal audiences did you see it with? Just fans.
Maybe 2.
Okay.
Maybe 1 or 2.
I saw it twice in the theater, and once was with a normal audience, and so everyone was going insane. Like it was like opening weekend, and so all the moments that hit real big.
Yeah.
But then my girlfriend saw it. She saw it late because she was like out of town or something when the weekend it came out. So a couple weeks later, we go to see it, and it was kind of like maybe not the time that a bunch of people pack a theater to.
Sure.
So there weren't a bunch of people in the theater, and it was a bunch of people. The people who were there weren't like getting a lot of the inside stuff.
Sure.
So it was a super weird experience. It was night and day. And I'm curious. I bring it up because I'm wondering how an audience experience with fans differs from being with the crew and the stars, who are all very.
I'm gonna say this. Not much.
Yeah, that's cool.
Not much.
That's cool.
It was cool. It was very cool. They all went nuts. They went nuts for everything. And it was so much fun to just look over. Like, I was seated sort of in the middle of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cast. That was like where my seat just happened to be, the ABC show. And they were going crazy. And then looking over, and it's like everywhere you looked was someone so famous, or like someone so famous in the Marvel world, where it's just like, oh, there's the writers for, they've done all of these and stuff like that. But everyone went crazy. Black Panther walks out of everyone freaks out. Like, even though so many of them knew what was coming, but so many of them didn't still. Even if you work on, like, if you're Gwyneth Paltrow and you show up for a day in that, I imagine you don't know what happens throughout that entire movie.
Well, she didn't even realize she was in a Spider-Man movie,
Yeah.
because how the production.
Maybe bad example, but yeah. It was a wild experience. I don't think it'll ever happen again, just because there's so many people in that movie, so many. It felt like the culmination of so much, and just everyone was so excited to be there. It felt like if something happened in that room, Hollywood's decimated, because everyone's there from Kevin Smith to Robert Downey Jr. to Colin Jost, because he's there with Scarlett, to there's just, everyone was there. It was wild. It was truly, it was wild. And it's one of those things that I think back on mid-quarantine, being like, will that ever happen again? Will I ever have a movie experience like that again? And that's the one I keep going back to, just because it was.
How could it happen again?
How could it? Who knows? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, amazing stories. This has been really fun talking to you. We're now at the end of the episode, though. It's time to create something together. And since I have been booking this podcast for a while, I'm wondering from a super professional expert, some tips. I mean, what I do oftentimes when I book someone, especially someone in comedy, I look to see who they're connected with, who I have had on the podcast before. So then when I say, hey, I'd love to talk to you, I've talked to these people, it's all people that they are connected with in some respect.
Of course.
So that seems like a good idea, but what are some other ideas for booking people and having a smooth transition?
I mean, like I mentioned before, the thing that I always liked was maybe getting people who don't necessarily get to chat all the time about this kind of stuff. The people who you like, who maybe not everyone knows about yet, are always fun, because there's so many times where I've booked someone and then, someone like Z-Way, where I booked her years ago for something. And then now she's the hottest thing in the world. Aquafina, I booked for something, and it was a tough sell to some people, because they were like, we don't really know who she is. And then a year and a half later was the biggest thing in the world, I think that's always exciting. And I think that's cool, where it's I respect this person. I think they should be out there. And you get really lucky sometimes, where it's oh yeah, they deserve it and they got it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for you too, as a host, just to keep it interesting for you. This is all obvious stuff I'm saying, I think, but it keeps it interesting because it's who you want to hear from.
Yeah.
And I think that is huge, just to keep yourself invested in the show. It was definitely what kept me invested in Asssscat. I was just like, these are the people I want. It's great. I hope the audience likes it, but truly I'm booking it for me. And I really hope other people appreciate that. But yeah, I think that's a good thing, going through and telling them, hey, here are your friends who have done it. But at the same time, also like, just shoot big sometimes, maybe not like A-list, but like shoot bigger than you think you can get.
Yeah.
And it works out sometimes.
I have learned that one is helpful too, because there are some people where I was like, well, it's a long shot. And then they give me an immediate yes. And I was like, huh?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm not weird about it.
Yeah, exactly. Some people just want to do shit. Some people just like talking and want to have fun. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind, is just if you see someone doing something fun on a show or on a podcast or whatever, and you're like, oh, clearly you're enjoying this and you like doing these things. I'm going to ask you, because why not? Also, the important thing to keep in mind is, what do you have to lose? It's like, just ask them. It doesn't matter. Just ask them.
Yeah. They're not going to go and tell everybody, hey, this guy asked me, so run from this guy.
Yeah.
Cancel
Who cares?
him. Yeah.
Who cares? Who cares? No. So I think those are my big tips, I think.
Well, there it is. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, dude. Super great.
Great talk. I love when there are fun stories and good info on here. Thanks to Patrick again for being on. Here are a few Twitter accounts to check out: at Patrick Cotnoir, at G Lucas Talk Show, and Rat Scraps, the new iteration of Asssscat, at Asssscat NYC. That's 4 S's. They're doing new shows starting on August 1st at Caveat here in New York City, which they're doing a bunch of comedy shows. So also follow them at Caveat NYC. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at There It Is Pod, and our YouTube at There It Is. Also, go to thereitispod.com to find our best blog, info on how to subscribe to our comedy newsletter, and how to nominate us for the Podcast Awards. Links in bio. Next week, we have legendary improviser Paul Valancourt. It was a great chat. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.